Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream, guys. Hope everybody's having a great day. I am coming on a little bit later because we've been working on videos, working on build videos. So today, though, I want to take some time and I want to ask a question, and it seems like a seems like a very easy to answer questions. But should we stop killing games? And you'll excuse me, guys. I didn't have my chat bot up, so give me just 1 second. This is a initiative started by. Well, we'll hear more about it in a second. But this initiative that has been started, and the issue and the reason around it is that a lot of games nowadays are service games. They are live service games, and most games require, many games at least, require that companies keep some sort of back end. They have to do something to keep the game going. And eventually the game isn't making any more money, and if you want to cut costs, the easiest way to do that is just take the game away. Especially if it's something that requires servers or is a live service type game. Hey, Vatcher, what's going on, man? This is something that it's going to cost the company money, and the companies want to make more money. And a while back, a number of years ago, actually, there was the net neutrality thing. For those who don't know, in the U.S., there was this issue where we were considering we're trying to pass a law to make, the internet a public utility. And I think that absolutely the internet should be a public utility. It should not be something that is for profit, just like electricity, basic water. These are things that everybody should have. Healthcare, right? These are things that every person in a developed country should have and be able to have. And, not even saying for free, right? Just saying at a cost that, these are things that should be provided, and it shouldn't be that we charge as much as we possibly can. And the reason for that, guys, just to make this clear, everybody needs water. And so if you have something that the demand is pretty much set, within some variance, everybody needs water, right? Then a company, in theory, if they bought up all the water supply, they could charge whatever the hell they want. And if you think that sounds like crazy, that's actually has happened in places like in California recently, or in our recent memory, right? And there's been issues with that where private people can control things that should be for everybody. Okay. And so that's what we're really talking about. And the internet, while it might not seem as important as water in our modern age, really is. The internet provides people that are poor, that don't have, access to whatever, with, ways of improving their station by learning online for free and what have you. Now, games going away and companies kind of being evil, does that rise to the same level as water or a public utility? No. Is it still important? Well, I mean, certainly as someone who plays games, like, I think it is. And is our consumer rights important? I think so. They're obviously a totally different level, but the statement that was made a long time ago concerning far more evil things, the only thing it takes for good to try, or for evil to triumph, is for good men to do nothing. And the only thing it took for net neutrality not to pass is for people not to do anything. And all these companies they would like to take away the freedoms. They'd like to take more money. They would like to make healthcare more expensive and what have you. And this is just one small example of that kind of evil. I know it doesn't seem, it's not nearly as bad as many of those other things, but it is still a kind. And the only thing that will, that it will take for this kind of stuff to flourish and to get worse is for us not to do anything about it. So that's what I want to do today. I want to take a look. This is a interview here. You'll own nothing. Yeah, exactly. By Gamers Nexus of I believe the Ross Scott, the creator of Stop Killing Games. And if you're curious about Stop Killing Games, just type it in. Type it in. StopKillingGames.com. It's here. There's all kinds of information. Right now, there's an initiative in the EU. So if you're an EU citizen, this is particularly important to you. And let's see what they have to say. And there's been a lot of people that have been vocal in favor of this, and there's been, I think, just one person kind of famously, which is Pirate Software, who's been very against it, actually. And let's just take a look and see what they have to say. This is a 40-minute video. We barely have that much time, so I'm going to let it play as much as I can, and yeah, we'll just see what they have to say.
Today we're joined by this guy.
In fact, I'm under the opinion that nothing less than an expiration date on the box or the store page or something would wake people up. See, right now in order to reverse engineer a server emulator, I mean, I feel like the people who do that are like Einstein's in a straitjacket trying to get themselves out to write an equation. I mean, it's just so hostile for trying to do it. But if they had all this documentation about how the networking protocols work, and that would go a long way.
Ross Scott of Accursed Farms, who's spearheading the Stop Killing Games initiative, which aims to protect consumers' rights to play video games even after a publisher decides to stop supporting it. The point being that once you've spent money on something, you should have some level of ownership or expectancy that you'll be able to use that thing that you bought. And Ross said in our interview and discussion today that he thinks,
I think it's the front lines.
and we agree with him, this is sort of the front lines of the enshittification discussion, where the things you own are becoming less.
So I'm sorry. I know I said I was going to let this run. We're a minute and 8 seconds in. I just want to say, if you don't know who these guys are, this is Steve from Gamers Nexus. They've made a new channel where they cover things that are more than just hardware related. And Steve is a journalist, and he has an entire team. And so I don't just want to give my opinion on something. I would like to see and show you guys something from somebody who's done a bunch of research and somebody who's very knowledgeable. And so it's not just like, oh, this YouTuber said, this YouTuber said. Let's see what somebody who's, first of all, a journalist and is actually doing some real reporting. Let's decide for ourselves.
Yours, and they're more prone to just disappearing at some point, even if you've spent money on them, and in ways that are less clear than the traditional subscription service approach, where at least that's very clear what your usage lifetime is. Currently, there's a powerful movement for a direct democracy citizens initiative in the EU to make this happen, and if it gets 1 million signatures, Ross says he feels pretty good about the chances.
This one, the European Citizens Initiative, I really think, I would bet money that we win it if we can get the signatures. Because, again, everything's kind of aligned for this. And for anyone who's not in the EU, like, USA or Canada, I think if this passed, I think it's incredibly likely you would all get the benefits downstream.
And we'll link that form below. There's also
the reason that what he's talking about is absolutely true, because we've seen this with other games. The EU is much better than the US, where I live, on a lot of this stuff. And when they pass laws, companies, it becomes where it's like, well, if we have to do two different things in two different countries, and then it makes one country look bad, whatever, they end up passing. And even though in the US, I think we have more problems with corporate interests and with money and politics stopping these things, that's one of the ways that it makes it easier for us to pass things that are honestly quite reasonable and everybody supports, right? Like, nobody wants people to die from not having health care. Nobody wants children gambling in games, and nobody wants to not own shit. Nobody wants to not own the games and the things that they purchase.
Action in the UK that requires 100,000 signatures, also linked below for those of you in the UK. And today we're talking with Ross about the current status of Stop Killing Games, what happens next, what happens if the 1 million signatures are achieved, and hopefully they are. It's possible right now. If enough people get involved, it actually can happen. And he also talks about why he thinks this is a potential proving grounds for things like ownership of digitally made content and products, and what happens next. And we'll also talk about how you can help the most effectively by speaking with Ross about what those options are. Let's get into it. This GNCA video is brought to you by us and our Honey Pot t-shirts for charity. The Honey Pot t-shirt features a custom foil design with a smashed shiny honey pot on the front, with the back featuring a GN logo with a bee flying away. Each shirt also comes with a trading card, ready to be played with its mechanics that grant treasure tokens to an opponent and then immediately take them back, including my own flavor text that I've written at the bottom. We're donating the profit from this shirt order to archive.org for its preservation of media and websites, the Cramden Institute for its e-waste recycling and its PC refurbishing and distribution programs, and the Public Interest Research Group for its support of consumer rights and warranty rights. Head over to store.gamersnexus.net to grab one today. And now we'll get straight to the interview. And remember, the links to those forms below, those are not the typical type of petition that goes nowhere and does nothing. These are actual legal processes in the UK and in the EU, and your signatures can actually help. But let's get to the discussion.
When he was talking about direct democracy, that's what he's talking about. This is a system where you can vote and actually have an impact, and it's not like someone voting for you like we have in the US.
What's kind of the elevator pitch, top level, and then we'll branch into some of the technicals.
Most video games, you pay for them, bring them home, play them, and it's yours effectively. There's rights issues, but if you bought a game, geez, I think even as far back as the 70s for like Atari or something, if you kept the equipment in good shape, it still works, and even online multiplayer, especially like around 90s, where if you could connect to an IP address or IPX or something, if you didn't change things, they can still work. And obviously most people did change things, but there's all sorts of support for that from the community. But so the industry has been kind of normalizing where you buy the game the same way as previous ones, you keep it, and then just at an undisclosed time period, they turn the server off, and because you have to connect to the publisher, the game's bricked. You can never run it again, and they
Yep.
keep your money though. So it's not like a service where, well, a few games are like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14, where they tell you exactly when your access ends. You pay for a month or pay for 6 months. Okay, and that's kind of, I want to say until about 2004, pretty much every single video game made was one of those two categories. Either
Right.
you're told how long it lasts, or you get to keep it and run it indefinitely. And this practice where they take away the ownership, or effective ownership, I guess, it's driven me up the wall, because that's led to more games effectively destroyed, that you can never run again
What up,
than
Vaughn?
any other practice. I mean, there's all sorts of obscure, games for, Commodore, or mentioned Atari, that we've managed to preserve them one way or another. But meanwhile, there's this black hole of games starting from, the mid 2000s up until now. And it's only getting worse. And the thing about this is, unfortunately, in the US, this is pretty locked down legally. But in many other countries, especially the EU and Australia, this was never really tested legally. Companies just did it, and nobody really stopped them. And the laws were never really written for this kind of.
That's the thing I was talking about earlier. All that it takes for this stuff to happen is us for just not do anything, right? It just takes a bit of apathy. So we've got to do something.
Situation.
I think because it's about video games, it's easier for people to be dismissive of some of the concerns, especially if they're not really attached to games the same way. And I think the best kind of way I have to reframe why it's important is this is kind of an extension of you'll own nothing, and you'll be happy.
I think it's the front lines.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, a lot of lawmakers or important people in general. You're right. They don't really. Usually, the only time video games come up are either whether
Violence.
targeting stuff to children that they're worried about, or gambling. Where it might be running.
Vaughn, I can't rehash the whole thing, man, but just to give you briefly, what we're talking about and what this initiative is to stop companies that have games that are live services and what have you. Basically, you don't own anything. Like you just said, it's the extension of like you won't own anything, and like you should be happy about that. It's the subscription services for things that don't need to be a subscription. It is, it's the not actually owning, like when even your TV right now, you agree to terms of service, and there's a lot of stuff on your TV that you don't own. You're not in control of. And if you pay for something, most people think they're purchasing something, and they own it and they can control everything about it. Right to repair, that all falls into the same category. So that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about fighting for the ability to be able to say, hey, I own this thing, to be able to own a product.
That's pretty much it. So, I mean, I can understand that this does get passed over, but no, that is a theory I've heard, that this could be kind of testing grounds to see what people will tolerate. I think the best real-world example of what's happening in video games would be printers, where, you bought a printer, it works, but because the driver to connect to the server doesn't work, okay, now it's bricked and doesn't work, even though it's
DRM for printers.
Yeah, exactly. There's several cases of that.
Guys, I don't know if you have this problem. I have an app. I don't let apps update anymore because they'll update so that they can place ads and like pop-ups in them, and it's like it happens for my lights. I control lights with my lights here with an app, and now it like pops up trying to sell me crap all the time because I accidentally updated it. And this is the problem we're talking about. It's the inshitification of the internet.
I think printers are the closest real world object.
And in case you don't know what that means, just to be clear, I'm sorry, that's just the term that is used. I'm sorry, that's a little bit vulgar. Is that companies actively making things worse for no other reason that they can, and it'll cause you to have to pay more money. It's not like it's not a company saying we can make a better product or we're making the best product we can. It's a company like actively making a worse product so that they can extract more money out of you.
Equivalent of what's going on.
I guess if you could briefly describe what point are you at in the process for Stop Killing Games, because this is an initiative where you're actually trying to go through the legal system to get something done.
Oh yeah, we've done a lot of stuff where, because I tried to attack on all cylinders on this.
Yeah, exactly, Vatra.
So we did this in two basic ways. One was there was a perfect test case for this, a game called The Crew by Ubisoft, where they shut it down and it just checked off every box for this being a good case for consumer agencies to look at. And we managed to get complaints on that filed in France, Germany, and Australia. We're still waiting on a decision, which is probably a good sign, because if we had no rights on this, then they could tell us that pretty quickly. We have lots of things underway with government or that we've exhausted. The other big way that we've been doing this is trying to propose law to governments on this through government petitions, or the big one now is the European Citizens Initiative. That's kind of the crown jewel of all this, where if we can get enough signatures on that, I think we end this. Now, the two ones we have active right now are European Citizens Initiative, which are open to anyone in the EU, from any citizen of an EU country. It doesn't matter where you live, but you have to be a citizen. And the UK. Our odds are worse in the UK, but it is an option that they do have a process to bring it before Parliament.
And so these two things, so these are forms that people can sign. The EU Citizens Initiative is an actual EU process, like it's an actual legal process, and requires 1 million signatures with some sub-requirements, so there needs to be a certain amount in different given countries. Currently, you're up at around 542,000 of the 1 million or so required. When you made your video, and I guess if you captured the footage a little before that, maybe within the last week or so, your screen capture had it at 453,000. So nearing.
We're at almost 600 now for the EU peeps.
I guess first of all, for anyone in the audience who you care about this issue, just pause right now, and I'll have the links in the description. If you're in the UK, there's a separate link. If you're in the EU, that's the one it sounds like the kind of big focus is on.
That's a good point. I should just drop this in.
But yeah, I was looking into it, and there's sort of Wikipedia lists 6 cases that have kind of gone through this process. There's some really serious things on this. Right to water, which I think the name's pretty self-explanatory.
Thankfully, I don't think we're beating that. That's our goal. I hope not. I hope not.
That would be a different concern. How did you find out about this process? Because I don't think this was your first avenue, right? This has been going for a while now.
It was a long, winding road of researching options. We lost an entire month basically chasing down dead ends for this, where we would call agencies, or volunteers would in those countries, and then we would just, from the same agency, we would get different answers. Some would say, well, no, you signed the license agreement, they can do whatever they want. Others saying, well, no, I think that means they have to run it indefinitely. And one in Germany said there is no clear legal regulation on this. There's the ECC, the Consumer Network,
Yeah.
but it's all a blur in my head how many pages I looked at trying to. It's like doing a 400 level college research paper project or something like that. This is basically a mechanism for the citizenry to tell government, hey, we have a problem, please address this. And there's a lot of requirements to get it launched. Like you can't just put anything like everybody should have flying cars or something. That would get thrown out.
It's pretty cool. This guy and apparently some other people have spent a full month like just working, calling places and what have you. Can you imagine how frustrating that was? Like, and if it's frustrating in the EU, you know it'd be worse in the US. And it was all a dead end, and he's still continuing to work on this. I think that's pretty cool. That shows a level of dedication that is pretty awesome.
And you have to include directives that show they have the authority to act on this. So you can't just say, ban UK's football team that we don't like or something. It's you can't even get it open for signing without passing several checks, essentially.
Okay.
And if we get the signatures, then it goes to the EU Commission, and then it essentially becomes kind of a fact-finding evaluation. I wouldn't say like a court case, but they're going to try and get information from all sides on this. So they'll hear from the industry, they'll hear from developers, hear from customers, that sort of thing. And then everybody would be able to kind of say their piece, and then the EU Commission would decide, okay, what's reasonable or not. And the reason I'm so optimistic is because of that kind of hole in the law I mentioned earlier, where there just aren't
Vatra says fact finding, not in my country.
clear terms on this already. So if we're coming in just asking for basic consumer rights that are in line with all kinds of other products, I think we would either win, or this would just look really bad for a lot of politicians in a international news level that they wouldn't want.
You've somewhat, I don't know if I don't want to attribute the wrong phrase to it, but I feel like you have maybe like a half joke slide about being an easy win, easy political victory for politicians.
Yeah, because from the politician standpoint, okay, politicians like to get things passed, so they can, have a victory lap, but they don't want things that are like really controversial or going to give them a lot of heat, or in trouble with their constituency. So, I mean, if you compare this to like something like immigration policies, or maybe something popular, like unpopular, like raising taxes on something, that's not a fun one for them to engage in if they don't have to, or if they're not sure the numbers. But this, like we said earlier, a lot of government doesn't care about video games in the first place, and really a lot of their constituency might not either. And this is pro-consumer, so this could be relatively easy for politicians to pass, because I mean, it's not a free win exactly, but the winds are blowing in the right direction for it. That's the way I would put it.
So on the technical side, I guess we can get into that. Your video does a good job of talking about this recently, but I think some of the first line of defense arguments you would have against some kind of video game preservation when there are elements that require server connectivity, the first thing a developer might oppose with that is you could straw man it and say, well, we're not giving away our source code. That's our intellectual property. That's crazy. We're not going to, we close the game. But that's kind of a misconception we could talk about. Another one might be that just on a pure technical level, or maybe a financial feasibility level, you could straw man it a different way and say, well, to expect us to re-architect a game because we're suffering financially and we have to shut it down, therefore we have to invest even more money into it to save it. I think those to me seem like the easiest arguments. How do you confront this?
It may not be an intentional straw man. I mean, it's easy to understand where people can get hung up on this. I'd say the very first point I would emphasize is that the initiative is not retroactive. It wouldn't be even if we wanted to. So we're talking about games and practices in the future. I think even if this passed, I think a really fast implementation would probably be 2 years minimum, but it could probably be longer than that. So, yeah, that's the first thing to acknowledge is let's talk about games in the future first.
Right.
That's the first framing. The second, like you mentioned, they don't. Well, first, we would not be requiring them to give out source code under any scenario. But let's say something like server binaries or something like that. See, for a lot of games right now, if they were never designed for something like this, it could be they don't have the rights from the company that they're using the middleware from, or have some microservice connected to, that they can't legally give this out even if they wanted to because of existing deals. So for how those games would be handled, I mean, like right now, that would be in the EU Commission's hands. But I'd say the only two options, if they just can't rework it or if it's just too costly, they could shut it down before the law went into effect. So, we're talking a couple years down the line. Or it could be that during the compromise process, the EU decides, okay, this is too disruptive to just do all at once like this. We're going to grandfather in everybody who's selling games before this date. Mm-hmm. So in other words, okay, since you were selling your game before 2028 or something, you get a free ride for this game. You will not be subject to these regulations, but any games that start getting sold after that date, that's when it kicks in. And from that point, I would emphasize developers to just start focusing on it, like just from the design phase onwards. So, nothing's been written yet. You're just figuring out how you're going to code this. And it could be, a lot of things could have to change depending on the game. It could be that, again, like for middleware or microservices, you might have to renegotiate with those vendors that you used to get things from, just so you have enough rights to allow an end-of-life build.
For the microservices and middleware vendors, any quick examples you could throw out there of not necessarily specific companies, but types of game systems that might use these?
I was thinking with The Crew.
Yeah.
That's a game that also used copyrighted music and name brand car licenses, which they might have said, okay, you can't sell it after this date.
Right.
And now I've never heard of a deal like that stopping the user to continue playing the game after that date. That's the difference. But let's say the deal was only for the client to have that, and those car models are in the server code somewhere.
Right.
That deal was never made, so they can't do it. So, but in the future, if you want to make a new car game and you're negotiating with Porsche or something, then they would know that, if they want to sell this game in the EU, which has 450 million people in it, we have to allow, we have to add an extra little clause that, okay, we can release server software that contains the model at end of life, even if we can't sell the game past that point.
Right.
And because it might also come up, it's entirely possible, well, for many of these games, it's maybe probable, that the server for this, there's no way it's going to be able to run on consumer hardware, like, especially for something like an MMO where it's meant to be dealing with thousands of players, that sort of thing. For a scenario like that, they would not have to adapt it to like an x86 machine or, a console or something. But what they would have to do is release some version of the server software. It could be stripped down, like maybe it cuts out stuff like, accounting information on all the accounts and stuff, and then they just disclose to customers, okay, if you want, here's the software, but it's going to require a Graviton 3 processor. Right. If you want to run this. Good luck figuring it out. You're on your own, Yeah,
go get your own AWS instance or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the goal here is, it doesn't have to be easy. It has to not be impossible. That's right. The kind of that.
By your vision of
a big part of this too, just because I think this is probably over the head of the average consumer, understandably so, is that what they are suggesting, what they're trying to do, like companies are never going to want to do this because it's going to cost them more time and more money. And we've seen corporate greed. I just want to point out that most recently with Dune Awakening, but Helldivers before it, Larian Studios with all of their games, but Baldur's Gate being the big one. Excuse me. Just 3 examples off the top of my head. There's many more, especially with indie games and what have you. These are companies that have sold a game at a price, and that's it. There are, Helldivers, there are transactions. You can continue to buy more content as it comes out if you would like. That might be something, but nobody that I've ever talked to has an issue, and you can get everything in game for free. These are games that are sold, and they're just sold as is. Could they make them subscriptions? Yes. Would they make more money? Yes. Games like ESO, where you pay for the game up front, just like you do, and you pay more, and there's a subscription, right? And it's not like these other games aren't using servers, right? With the exception of Baldur's Gate, right? These other games are using servers too. And I've heard so many excuses about why they have to do this. They have to do this. They don't have to do that. They're making money left and right. And yes, it is the work. The company is never going. A corporation is never going to be okay with making less money. And so that's why we have to pass laws, because otherwise they'll just never go for it.
Of it, do you think that the law would kind of explicitly lay out a few options for developers for how they can keep the games reasonably playable, or is it kind of up to the developer?
It's hard to say. It depends how hands-on the EU wanted to get. If I had to just guess, I would lean towards no, because that's something you mentioned earlier. I think I forgot to get to. One of the reasons we worded the initiative the way we did, we focused on the game being in a playable state. We did not say, okay, you need to include the server binaries, or you need to patch the client to allow, private server functionality, or you need to include source code. Because as soon as you do that, that actually could run up against existing copyright laws, because now you're telling developers they need to release this specific code, and that might have their intellectual property. By listing the goal, a working game, something they would have already sold limited rights to just in the license agreement as it is, that allows us to kind of sidestep that, where, we're not telling them how they do this. They just need to hit that goal any way that they deem fit, essentially.
Has there been any developer engagement thus far? You named and thanked a couple developers in your video early on who were positive, but what's that side been like?
Mostly radio silent,
Okay.
to be honest.
All right.
I'd say there are more for the ones I've encountered. There are more for it than are against it, but there is, I'd say 20 to 30% sometimes against it, but a whole lot of that comes from them thinking, hey, we coded this game that was never intended. They think we're saying you need to change everything you did about the game and re-architect everything.
Right.
And I think that causes kind of a knee-jerk reaction against it.
Right. And so that's, obviously the intent, as you said.
For those who don't know, there's been more than a little drama about this with Pirate Software saying some things that he was kind of a jerk, pretty strong stuff that I won't repeat on this live stream. And I think it was he's someone who develops games and worked for Blizzard for a long time. And I mean, obviously I don't want to get anywhere near that with a 10-foot pole. You can check it out for yourself. There's information and stuff, but I think that's some of what they're alluding to here.
That is future looking. So
Yeah. In order to really be against this, you basically would have to take the stance that it's not possible to make a game that's meant to run online only that can have an end of life build for the customer. And I think if you frame it that way, I think a lot of developers are going to say that's kind of silly. That's the other thing that kind of works in our favor is in the absence of legal guidelines, there's no customer standards either besides indefinitely, because the earliest one I know of that the shortest game I know of, there might be a couple that are shorter, I think was the Culling 2, which lasted 8 days on the market, then it shut down. And then the longest I know of that uses this practice where you just bought it once and then get to keep it, but it's online only, is Guild Wars. That's still going. Guild Wars 1, from 2000. If you bought that in 2005, it still works. They're still supporting it. So that's a hell of a spread to, have the
8 days to 2 decades.
Yeah, I guess with the 8 days one, they did refund it. The shortest one I know of where there were no refunds is ironically named Lawbreakers, which I think was about a year.
Oh my god!
That was Blazinski's studio, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and that was an arena shooter.
Yeah.
You're telling me if they hadn't known this was a requirement coming, they couldn't have designed it to just have a build ready by end of life that allowed a private server connection,
Even
so
just like LAN or something.
Yeah, exactly. So 8 people can hop around and have them. I don't buy it, that you couldn't do that.
Right. What do you think at this stage? What's the momentum look like now after releasing your latest video, which was a couple days ago at the time we're recording this? Does it look positive to you? You know, where do you feel like things are at right now?
I think my latest video kind of cleared up a bunch of stuff and thankfully brought in some big YouTubers to start talking about, which is incredibly helpful. What I've been saying is we've upgraded it from doomed to long shot.
Okay.
So, but like this, if the momentum keeps the way it is now, we've got this. But I'm used to a lot of disappointment. I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I would love to be wrong.
God.
What's the date that the EU one needs to be?
July 31st.
Okay.
So end of July. That's when. That's kind of our make or break moment.
And again, if anyone watching this, if you're an EU citizen, then just open it now and go do it. If you
and for anyone who's not in the EU, like USA or Canada, I think if this passed, I think it's incredibly likely you would all get the benefits downstream.
Yeah.
Because if these companies know, okay, we need to have an end of life build if we're going to sell our game in the EU. Well, once they drop support, if they're already releasing it there anyway, they may as well release it globally because the work have already been done on it. Like the analogy I make to this is, several years back, Australia sued Valve over not allowing refunds on digital games. Valve lost, so afterwards, rather than just allowing Australians to have refunds, they just made that the policy globally because they decided it just wasn't worth it going through this country by country.
This happens a lot with a lot of
on
different
it, and
things.
just to bite the bullet and just get it over with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it would be
that's-
very similar to that.
That's where they brought in that. I don't know what it is today, but at the time it was if you had played under 2 hours, you could get a refund or something like that. No, that's a really good example. Yeah, I think
And you can often
Also,
play
even
more
if
than
the-
that.
publisher doesn't want to make it available readily for the U.S. market or wherever else. I would think chances are if there's something released for the EU market, it'll kind of work its way out. Like where
Yeah,
It's not a
I'm
lot.
thinking of that Jurassic Park quote of "Life finds a way."
yeah, it would find its way through. So if this citizens initiative goes through, what would be the next? If you get the 1 million signatures, what's the next thing that happens?
The next thing that happens is the organizers, the official ones. Yeah, I'm actually not eligible to be an official part of this, even though I've been promoting the hell out of it. The organizers are actual EU citizens. They would go to Brussels and then discuss it with the EU Commission. That could go a couple different ways. It could be that the EU Commission understands what we want and they just ask for minimal feedback, or it could be they're there every other day answering questions and hashing this out. A lot is in the EU Commission's court at that point.
Okay, and then what about the form that you have for sign up for the UK? What is that one?
Okay, the UK, I'll try to do this one quickly. This one's been a bigger mess than any other because we initially launched this last year, and in the middle of it, Parliament got dissolved, which means the whole thing closed early. But before that happened, we got an answer back that didn't really address the problem. Like they were saying no, but they were giving all these reasons that were unrelated. So it's like they didn't get it. And that ended up being so bad, the petition committee actually sent a letter back to the it was culture, I forget the department of Culture, Media, something like that, back to them saying this answer isn't sufficient. Can you please try again? Which apparently is really rare for that to happen. So it's so bad it got the petition committee involved, and then everything shut down. So then many months passed while it got reassembled again, and then once it reopened, we submitted the petition again, and then we got that almost the exact same answer back, except this time I think it's just one guy in the department who's answering this, and he's just like copying and pasting his previous ads. It's like somebody copying somebody else's
As per my
homework.
previous email, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm just gonna photocopy this, rearrange it, and that bam, I'm done. I'm going to lunch. I really think that's what's going on. So the only way around that is for us to get more signatures, 100,000. I think we're at 30,000 about right now for that, and then that will leapfrog.
We're going to jump ahead a little bit here because we're going to run out of time.
Any misconceptions you want to go through after your newest video? I mean, you already spent a lot of time in that video talking about misconceptions, and it was done really well, but is there anything kind of new that's come up you want to talk about?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. The number one misconception we always get is that we're asking for endless support. No, we're not.
All right,
they
Franny.
can end the game anytime they want.
Franny, are you familiar with this? If you're not, check it out. It affects you.
The support. We're asking for end of life.
We need your
plans
help.
so that it's not impossible to run the game. I guess not a misconception, but another possible compromise that might emerge in the EU that we were on the fence for including in the initiative itself would be say, okay, we're not going to give you a working game, but at end of life, we're going to give you the equivalent of
100%
repair
Vatra.
instructions.
Okay.
So they might release, documentation on the networking structure, or decrypt the packets and that sort of thing. Whatever they can kind of, basically to give tech-savvy users a fighting chance of making a server.
Well, Franny, when you get a chance, maybe check it out. I'll link the video and everything else in the description here. But yeah, pretty important. So check it out. But I appreciate you stopping by to say hi. I don't want to keep you.
Emulator, that's where source code might come in as like an alternative. Of course, we'd be happy for source code, but we're not insisting on it anywhere because there can be a lot of reasons people don't
Awesome.
want to. At least that, but if it got compromised down to that, I still think that would be very good because, again, it's like where there's a will, there's a way. See, right now it's in order to.
Sorry, I know we're going to run out of time. I just want to address, Vatra had a really good point. Anyone who fights against your right to not be exploited is a fool. I agree. I think that one of the biggest problem is like we're constantly bombarded with information and what have you. And, you only get snippets of the information, and to look into everything that might possibly affect you, it takes a ton of time and ton of energy, and it takes more time and energy than the average person has. And so, things like this will work, when companies or governments will have bills that are like, they'll call it the Freedom to blah, blah, blah Act or whatever. I mean, a good one is the right to work. Right to work state sounds like, oh, you have the right. Okay, you're giving someone a right. Yeah. No, right to work states are actually like make it easy for companies to treat their people like garbage. And I grew up in one. And so but they phrase it and whatever. And so it can become very difficult. And like even some of the people that have like gone against this, it's because they were a bit ignorant. And so I know it's hard, it's difficult or whatever, but that's the same thing happened with the net neutrality. Companies, who wanted to be able to, internet companies, right? Cable providers and what have you, wanted to be able to continue to charge whatever the hell they wanted to and up the prices and lower the quality of service. And they convinced a lot of people to vote against their own self-interest and to promote things against their own self-interest by spinning it. And so I know it's difficult. It's one of the reasons we need more education so that people can be more illiterate and understand how these things work and not be so easily tricked. And then we have to take the time to kind of figure it out, which is difficult and hard and whatever. So yeah, 100%. If a company can sacrifice you versus them, they will throw you into the on the tracks every single time without a thought. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
In order to reverse engineer a server emulator, I mean, I feel like the people who do that are like Einstein's in a.
I will say this too, and again, I know that we're going to run out of time, but one of the things it might take decades, I don't know, but one of the things that we're eventually going to figure out as a people, corporations in our current system are all evil corps. If a corporation gets so big at some point, it inevitably leads to that situation. So we need to do something to change that. And I think, honestly, it's going to take us decades to figure that out as a society. And until then, like, unless we get active and actually, like, again, the only thing it takes for these companies to succeed is for us not to do anything. And one day, you know, a lot of times we're preaching to the choir with this stuff, but one day it will come into people. People don't even realize they slowly lose these freedoms. They slowly lose, you know, like it's the enshittification of everything, right? Why am I being charged, you know, a subscription for a thing that I can just buy and that there's no reason? Why does my fan need a subscription service? You know, but hopefully we'll get there.
Great jacket trying to get themselves out to write an equation. I mean, it's just so hostile for trying to do it. But if they had all this documentation,
I want to see what else what he recommends as far as next steps, and then we'll have to call
I guess
it.
For people watching, it sounds like the calls to action are if you can sign it, the EU Citizens Initiative, European Citizens Initiative, which I'll link below. There's the one in the UK, and we'll link that as well. Requires fewer signatures, but I guess the challenge is that they're all in one. You know,
they all have to be UK residents or citizens.
Right. And then for additional information, you've got your own videos on Accursed Farms.
If you have lots of questions, like real specific stuff, I did one video, giant FAQ, talking about the initiative, where I answered almost 40 questions to just, and it's timestamped, so you can just jump to which one. I'd say there's a 95% chance I answered whatever the question is in that video.
Is your plan to get back to the video game content? You know,
oh God, yes. After I never wanted to do this. It just drove me insane that seeing them destroyed and the problem getting worse. Look, after July, I'm done. I mean, I've done everything I could have on this, so I totally want to get back to. Most of my channel is just kind of fun, game-related comedy stuff or weird videos, and 100% want to get back to that.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I don't think anyone can blame you at this point. You've it's.
I feel like I drew the short straw. Is how it feels. So.
Well, we're back to the help us Obi-Wan. You're our only hope, and it's
well
at this point viewers.
That's most of what the last video said, is that if you're just depending on me, then you're in trouble.
Right.
You know, I need more help on this.
Right.
So.
Hopefully the message gets out. Yeah. I mean,
cool, guys. Well, we're gonna have to end it here because we got to hop in. Yeah, check it out if you want to learn more. Obviously, if you're in the EU, UK, in Europe in general, check it out. And you know, if you're not, you're the US, just realize this stuff is out there, guys. This will affect us. Share it with someone if you have friends that are in the EU or UK. Just like Franny, I know Franny's. I believe they're a citizen. I sometimes forget where they're living right now. I think they're living in the UK, or I'm sorry, in Europe generally. Even though they lived outside there at different times. I say that. Franny might be local. Anyways, I don't remember, but I know that they're originally from the EU area. So, anyways, we're checking out. I'm gonna go ahead and end this stream. We'll kick over on YouTube, and then we'll kick you over to the new one, and we're gonna be hopping into some a little bit of Godslayer group for with Nani, and then that was in the boss Discord. We got to go respec our character, and we got to grab one or two pieces of gear out of the bank. And yeah, we'll be right back, guys. And if you're on Twitch, you don't got to go anywhere. Just hang out. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I know this isn't the normal stuff. It doesn't get obviously I can see by the numbers, it doesn't get the normal engagement. People click in, click off. But this kind of stuff is important, you know, and it's not just about the small stuff that is affecting games, obviously. But if they can do this with games, they can do it for other things. And there's already plenty of things out there. And we have to, if you're not willing to fight and stand up for your rights, you will lose them. It just happens. All right, we'll call it there. Oh, there's a problem with the second link. Okay, thank you, Franny. Franny's still here. I think I'll have to fix it later, but I'm sorry. The video link, the one after Stop Killing Games. Oh, to the YouTube channel. Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? It did freak out. I don't know why that freaked out. It should be at Accursed. Thank you, Franny. We'll just fix it now. There we go. Found it. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, guys. We're going to end this on YouTube.